The hum of the server racks was usually a soothing lullaby, the glow of my monitors a familiar comfort. At 25 years old, I, Lucy, was living the dream. A driven software engineer thriving in a bustling East Coast city, miles away from the quiet, stifling small hometown I'd worked so hard to escape. My apartment had a view of the skyline, my fridge was always stocked with overpriced organic kale, and my calendar was a beautiful symphony of coding sprints, gym sessions, and the occasional well-deserved happy hour with colleagues who actually understood the difference between Python and Java. Life was good, predictable, ordered. Then, my phone buzzed. It was an ordinary Tuesday. I was deep in the zone, debugging a particularly stubborn line of code that was making our new app crash every third click. The text notification pulled me out of my hyper-focused state, and I almost swiped it away without looking. It was from Chloe, my 15-year-old sister. We usually communicated in emojis and clipped sarcastic remarks, so the urgency of her message was immediately jarring. "Mom and Dad are really sick. In the hospital. It's bad." My fingers froze mid-air. The cool logic of the code on my screen vanished, replaced by a cold, visceral dread that shot straight to my gut. Sick? In the hospital? My parents, while not exactly paragons of health, rarely even caught a cold. They were the stoic, walk-it-off type. For them to be in the hospital and for Chloe to be texting me instead of calling an ambulance or a relative meant something was seriously wrong. "It's bad," the exclamation point screamed at me. Without a second thought, the programming logic that governed my professional life evaporated. My family, my parents, my little sister. No matter how far I'd physically moved, no matter how much emotional distance I'd tried to cultivate, that primal bond snapped into place. Devoted to her family, I reacted on pure instinct. I slammed my office door shut, grabbing my laptop. My manager, a perpetually stressed man named Mark, looked up, startled. "Lucy? Everything okay? Number family emergency? Parents in the hospital? I need 3 weeks of urgent leave." The words tumbled out, urgent and breathless. "I need to go home. Now." Mark, bless his heart, knew I wasn't one for drama. He just nodded, his face etched with concern. "Go, we'll manage. Keep us updated." I was already halfway out the door, pulling out my phone, booking a flight. My fingers flew across the screen, searching for the fastest way to get from this East Coast metropolis to the tiny regional airport back home. The first flight I found was connecting, ridiculously expensive, but it left in 2 hours. I didn't hesitate. I impulsively booked the next available flight, paying an exorbitant tens of thousands of dollars for last-minute premium tickets. First class, just to get on that plane. The cost was irrelevant. All that mattered was getting there. The next 12 hours were an ordeal by plane and taxi, fueled by escalating panic and concern for my parents. The first leg of the flight was a blur. I tried to call Chloe, but her phone went straight to voicemail. I tried my parents' landline, no answer. My imagination, usually so pragmatic, ran wild. Was it a car accident? A sudden, aggressive illness? Had they been hurt? Chloe's cryptic, "It's bad," echoed in my head, growing louder with every passing minute. The premium seats I'd paid for were useless. I couldn't relax. I couldn't sleep. I just stared out the window, watching the landscape blur beneath us, each mile an agonizing inch closer to answers I dreaded. I messaged Chloe repeatedly, begging for more information, for an update, for anything. Nothing. Just the crushing silence. My heart pounded with a frantic rhythm, a constant reminder of the fear gnawing at me. The connecting flight was delayed. My stomach churned. I paced the airport terminal like a caged animal, glaring at the departure board, willing the numbers to change. Each minute felt like an hour, each hour a lifetime. I visualized my parents, frail and hooked up to machines. My little sister, alone and scared. The images flashed behind my eyes, making my breath catch in my throat. Finally, we landed at the small regional airport. It was past midnight. The air was cold, damp. The familiar scent of pine and exhaust hung heavy. The terminal was practically empty, a ghost town. I practically ran to the taxi stand, barking my home address at the startled driver. The ride home was excruciating. The familiar roads, the quiet neighborhoods, each turn felt wrong without the context of normal life. Every light out in a house felt like a sinister omen. I gripped the seat, my knuckles white, my eyes scanning for any sign of emergency vehicles, any unusual activity. The silence from Chloe and my parents was deafening. It fueled my deepest fears. Why weren't they answering? Why had Chloe just sent one text and then vanished? My mind raced, frantically trying to piece together a rational explanation. Maybe their phones died. Maybe Chloe was so overwhelmed she couldn't talk. Maybe it was worse than I could imagine. The anxiety was a physical weight, pressing down on my chest, making it hard to breathe. Finally, the taxi pulled up to our modest, two-story house. The lights were on, all of them. A surprising number of lights for a medical emergency in the middle of the night. My heart leaped with a fresh surge of adrenaline. No ambulances, no police cars, just the familiar, brightly lit facade of my childhood home. I paid the driver, practically throwing the money at him, and rushed up the walkway. My key, a spare I still carried on my keychain, trembled in my hand. I pushed the door open, my breath held tight in my chest, bracing myself for... What? Sirens? Doctors? Weeping? The living room was brightly lit. The television was on, tuned to some late-night sitcom, its laugh track echoing faintly. And there they were. My mother, propped up on the sofa, a cozy blanket draped over her, munching on popcorn. My father, reclined in his favorite armchair, a half-eaten bag of chips on his lap, a contented sigh escaping him. And Chloe, my 15-year-old sister, sprawled on the floor, scrolling through her phone, a half-empty soda can beside her. No fours, no oxygen masks, no worried expressions, just them, lounging, watching TV. I stood in the doorway, exhausted, heart still pounding, tens of thousands of dollars lighter, 3 weeks of my career put on hold. The reality of the scene hit me with the force of a physical blow, far harder than any punch. Mom? Dad? My voice was barely a whisper, hoarse from the long journey, ragged from the emotional turmoil. They all looked up, startled. Chloe's eyes widened, then a mischievous grin spread across her face. My mother blinked, then smiled, a little too brightly. My father just looked confused for a second, then his face cleared. "Lucy," my mother exclaimed, feigning surprise. "What are you doing here?" My voice rose, the exhaustion and fear quickly transforming into a white-hot, blinding rage. "What am I doing here? Chloe texted me that you were sick, in the hospital. I spent a fortune to get here. I thought you were dying." My father chuckled, a low, dismissive sound. My mother waved a casual hand, and Chloe, the architect of my torment, burst into laughter, bright and unrepentant. "Oh, that?" my father said, waving a dismissive hand. "Chloe just playing a little prank, honey? Just having a bit of fun?" And then my little sister, the cause of my 12-hour ordeal and tens of thousands of dollars in debt, looked up from her phone, her eyes shining with malicious glee, and delivered the words that shattered my world. "Just kidding," she chirped, and then dissolved into another fit of giggles. My blood ran cold. The air left my lungs. I stared at them, my family, my reason for rushing halfway across the country in a panic. The sitcom laughter from the TV seemed to mock me. This wasn't just a prank. This was cruel. This was calculated. And their casual indifference to my suffering, their ready defense of Chloe's appalling behavior, was a betrayal that cut deeper than any financial loss. My vision narrowed, my hands clenched. The realization hit me with devastating clarity. This was not a mistake. This was a pattern. And it was time, finally, to break it. "A joke?" I finally choked out, my voice raw, barely recognizable. "Do you have any idea what I've just been through? What I paid? The panic you put me through?" My father, usually so gruff, just shrugged. "Well, you got here, didn't you? No harm, no foul." My mother, always the appeaser, waved a dismissive hand. "Oh, Lucy, don't be so dramatic. It was just Chloe being Chloe." Utterly furious, I rounded on Chloe. Her face was still lit up with a smug, self-satisfied grin. "Chloe, how could you do something like that? This isn't funny. This is cruel." But before she could even respond, my parents immediately defended their younger daughter. My mother folded her arms, her expression hardening. "Now, you leave your sister alone, Lucy. She's just a child. She didn't mean anything by it." "A child?" I practically shrieked, the injustice of it all rising like bile in my throat. "She's 15. She knows exactly what she's doing. She knew I'd come. She knew I'd pay. She did this because she could." My voice cracked. "And you're defending her after what you put me through?" My father finally sat up, his brow furrowed with annoyance rather than remorse. "Watch your tone, young lady. We're your parents, and Chloe is your sister. Family sticks together. You should be grateful we're all healthy." Grateful. The word hung in the air, a grotesque mockery of everything I had just endured. Grateful for their deception, grateful for their callous disregard, stunned by their blatant favoritism and callous disregard for my distress. A cold resolve hardened my heart. It was a clarity born of pain, sharp and absolute. This wasn't a one-off incident. This was the culmination of a lifetime of being taken for granted, of being the responsible one, the one who always sacrificed, always paid, always came running, while Chloe remained the baby, perpetually excused, perpetually indulged. Without a word, I silently turned and left. I didn't slam the door, didn't shout a final insult. I just turned my back on them, on their laughter, on their easy dismissal of my anguish, and walked out. The air outside was cold, but it was a cleansing cold, a stark contrast to the suffocating injustice inside. I didn't go back to the airport. I didn't get another taxi. I just started walking. I walked for hours, the suburban streets silent in the dead of night, the streetlights casting long, lonely shadows. My phone buzzed with worried texts from Mark, asking for an update, offering support. I ignored them all. My mind was ablaze, replaying every moment, every sacrifice. I remembered cutting short my college social life to pick Chloe up from school because my parents forgot. I remembered sending money home for emergencies that always seemed to coincide with Chloe wanting a new phone or a designer handbag. I remembered the endless requests for loans that were never repaid. I remembered their subtle digs, their constant reminders of how much Chloe needed me, how much she looked up to me, a thinly veiled manipulation to keep the money flowing. They had conditioned me, molded me into their personal ATM, their emergency contact for convenience, not care. And now this, the ultimate betrayal. A malicious prank, executed with chilling precision, designed to exploit my devotion and my bank account, all while they sat comfortably on their sofa, laughing. By the time the sun began to paint the sky in hues of orange and pink, I had made a decision. A hard, irreversible decision. I walked to the nearest motel, checked in, and collapsed onto the bed, physically and emotionally drained. But underneath the exhaustion, a fierce, unwavering resolve had taken root. The very next week, I executed my plan. My parents' monthly allowance, the substantial sum I sent every single month to cover their bills and lifestyle, was stopped. Chloe's allowance, her school trip money, her new clothes budget, all gone. I cut off all financial support to my family, including Chloe's allowance and school fees. I changed the passwords to all the online accounts I managed for them, utility bills, streaming services, even their vague emergency fund that was mostly used for impulse purchases. I called the power company, the internet provider, the phone company, and removed myself as the payer on their accounts. They were on their own. It didn't take long for the calls to start. The first one was from my mother, just a few days after the direct deposit usually hit their account. Her tone was puzzled, then quickly escalated to annoyance. "Lucy? My bank account says your transfer didn't go through. What's wrong with the system?" "There's nothing wrong with the system, Mom," I said, my voice calm, almost detached. I stopped the transfers. A stunned silence. Then her voice rose, sharp and accusatory. "What do you mean you stopped them? Are you crazy? How are we supposed to live? How is Chloe supposed to go to her field trip next month?" "That's for you to figure out," I replied, my voice steady. "Just like I had to figure things out when you left me to pay off Jim's debts. Just like I had to figure out how to get home after you joked about being in the hospital." Her next words were a furious torrent of accusations. "You ungrateful brat, after everything we've done for you. You think you're so smart, off in your big city. We raised you. We deserve this. Chloe needs this." I listened, letting the words wash over me. The anger, the entitlement, the blatant manipulation, it was all so familiar. But this time it had no power over me. My parents, accustomed to my unwavering financial contributions, immediately began to call and scold me, their tone demanding and accusatory. "Mom, Dad," I said, addressing them both, knowing they were likely on speaker. "You defended Chloe for a cruel prank that cost me thousands of dollars and immense emotional distress. You laughed at my pain. You taught me a very valuable lesson about what you value and who you value. I've learned it, and now you get to learn yours. Goodbye." I hung up, and for the first time I didn't feel guilty. I felt an exhilarating sense of freedom. The calls continued for days. Voicemails filled with escalating threats, then tearful pleas, then furious accusations again. From my mother, my father, and even Chloe, who somehow managed to make "Mommy, I can't go to the mall without my allowance" sound like a life or death crisis. I remained unyielding, ignoring their pleas and threats. As days turned into weeks, their calls grew increasingly desperate, transitioning from anger to attempts at flattery and reconciliation. "Oh, Lucy, we miss you so much. Your cooking, your advice. Honey, you're so brilliant. We know you can help us figure this out. Chloe's so sad without you. She misses her big sister." I let them ring. I let the voicemails pile up. I, however, steadfastly ignored them, having reached my breaking point. The emotional blackmail, the transparent attempts to lure me back into their financial web, held no sway. My heart, once so easily swayed by their pleas, was now hardened by a cold, protective resolve. I had endured enough. My life was mine now, and it was time they learned what true independence and true consequences felt like. The silence on my phone, after weeks of relentless buzzing, was the most satisfying sound. It was the sound of a boundary firmly established, of a lifeline irrevocably cut. I knew what I was doing was drastic, perhaps even cruel in their eyes, but in mine, it was self-preservation. It was the only way to break the cycle. I had to let them fall, however painful it might be, for them to finally learn to stand on their own. And for me to finally, truly be free. The silence from my family was initially a balm, a sweet relief after weeks of incessant, angry calls and desperate, manipulative voicemails. My life in the city, freed from the constant emotional and financial drain, began to truly flourish. I was working long hours, yes, but now every cent I earned, every ounce of energy I expended was for me. I started saving aggressively, something that had always felt impossible before. The idea of true financial independence, a concept I'd only ever dreamed of, was slowly becoming a tangible reality. I knew, deep down, that their silence wouldn't last forever. My parents, driven by growing frustration and a sense of entitlement, were not the type to simply give up when their well ran dry. They saw my cutting them off not as a consequence of their actions, but as a personal affront, a challenge to their authority. The phone rang one crisp Saturday morning, an unfamiliar number flashing on the screen. My heart gave a little lurch. I almost didn't answer, but something, perhaps a morbid curiosity, compelled me. "Hello?" I said, my voice guarded. "Lucy, it's your father." His voice boomed, but it was strained, crackling with an undertone of desperation I hadn't heard before. "What the hell is going on? We're here, in your city. We came to talk some sense into you." My breath hitched. "They're here?" A cold wave washed over me, a mix of disbelief and a flicker of the old panic. My parents and sister. In my city, my private sanctuary. "What are you talking about?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "We're at your apartment building," he shouted, frustration bubbling over. "The manager says you don't live here anymore. Where are you, Lucy? This isn't funny. We flew all this way." A sudden, sharp laugh escaped me. It wasn't a joyful sound, but a harsh, bitter one. "You flew here? On whose dime exactly?" I scoffed. "And yes, Dad, I moved. Months ago. I guess you missed that update while you were busy joking about being in the hospital." There was a stunned silence on his end, followed by the muffled sound of my mother's exasperated voice in the background, then Chloe's whiny complaint. "You moved?" my father finally roared. "Without telling us? Lucy, what kind of stunt is this? We spent a fortune on these tickets. We don't have anywhere to go. We're stranded." The irony was not lost on me. Stranded, just like I had been. With no money and no one else to turn to, they were left stranded. The universe, it seemed, had a cruel sense of humor. They were forced to make the same difficult, expensive journey home that I had endured, but without the desperate, frantic concern for their well-being. "That sounds like a you problem, Dad," I said, my voice surprisingly calm. The old me would have been riddled with guilt, rushing to their rescue, but the new me felt nothing but a cool, detached sense of poetic justice. "Perhaps you should have thought about that before you orchestrated a cruel prank that cost me thousands and put my job on the line. Perhaps you should have considered the consequences of treating me like your personal ATM." "Lucy, your mother is crying," he blustered, trying to weaponize my mother's tears as he always did. "Chloe is hungry. We have no money for a hotel. What are we supposed to do?" "You do what I did," I replied, the words precise and measured. "You figure it out. You find a way home. You experience what it feels like to be completely on your own, with no safety net you didn't earn. Welcome to my world, Dad, the real world." I could hear my mother's wails growing louder in the background, mixed with Chloe's angry shouts. My father sputtered, unable to find a coherent comeback. "I hope your flight home is as comfortable as mine was," I finished, and then I hung up. I took a deep breath, and for the first time in my life I felt truly, completely free from their emotional grasp. I didn't hear from them for several weeks after that. The silence was golden. I imagined their arduous journey back home, forced to scrape together money for tickets, enduring long layovers, perhaps even experiencing the indignity of being stuck at an airport. The thought brought a grim satisfaction. It was a taste of their own medicine, served cold. Back home, without my generous financial aid, their once stable, carefree life dissolved into chaos and turmoil. I knew this because I eventually got a long, rambling call from my Aunt Carol, who was far less judgmental than my parents. She spilled all the tea, as Chloe would say. "Lucy, honey, your parents are having a real tough time," Aunt Carol began, her voice laced with a mix of concern and thinly veiled exasperation. "Your dad had to go back to work, can you believe it? At the old hardware store, and your mother's taken up a job at the diner, just like you used to. They're struggling to make ends meet." A faint smile touched my lips. My mother, the woman who used to tell me waiting tables was beneath our family, now doing it herself. The irony was exquisite. "And Chloe," Aunt Carol continued, her voice dropping to a sympathetic whisper, "Oh, honey, she's having a terrible time. Her friends are all making fun of her. She can't go to the mall, can't buy designer clothes, can't keep up with the latest trends. They call her Poor Chloe now. She even got uninvited to Tiffany's Sweet 16 because she couldn't afford a gift." Chloe, stripped of her allowance and unable to keep up with her friends' lavish lifestyles, suddenly found herself mocked and ridiculed by her peers. The girl who had always been the golden child, the pampered princess, was now facing the harsh realities of life without a sugar mama. Her carefully constructed social world, built on materialism and my financial generosity, had crumbled. The family's once stable, carefree life dissolved into chaos and turmoil. My parents and Chloe had always lived in a bubble, cushioned by my efforts. Now, that bubble had burst. They were facing the consequences of their own choices and their own laziness. They were experiencing the discomfort they had so casually inflicted on me, And a part of me, a deep, wounded part, felt a fierce sense of vindication. Meanwhile, my own life continued its upward trajectory. After not having to shell out tens of thousands of dollars for my family, I was finally able to make significant financial moves. The money I was saving grew exponentially. I worked hard, yes, but now every extra hour, every project I took on, built my future, not theirs. One crisp autumn morning, I signed the papers. I purchased my own home. Not a grand mansion, but a charming two-bedroom condo with a view of the city park. It was mine. Every square foot. No one could joke me out of it. No one could demand access or expect free rent. It was my sanctuary, a testament to my hard work and newfound independence. A few months later, I bought a new car. Nothing flashy, but reliable, comfortable, and, again, entirely my own. I was building a life, brick by brick, on a foundation of self-reliance and earned success. I lived a life free from the emotional burden of my selfish and biased family, no longer tethered by obligation. The constant anxiety, the low thrum of worry about their next demand had completely vanished. I was finally, truly free. Time passed. Seasons changed. I heard snippets of news from Aunt Carol. My parents were still working, still grumbling, but they were working. Chloe had apparently taken a part-time job at a local fast food restaurant, a far cry from her previous lavish lifestyle. It wasn't perfect, but they were surviving, and more importantly, they were learning. One day, almost a year after the hospital joke, I received a handwritten letter. Not a text, not a call, a letter. It was from my mother. It was clumsy, hesitant, filled with awkward apologies and admissions of how hard things had been. She mentioned how much she missed me, not just my money, but me. How she understood now what I had gone through. How Chloe was even starting to appreciate a dollar earned. My father sent one too, gruff but sincere, acknowledging his part in enabling Chloe and taking me for granted. Even Chloe sent a short, somewhat sheepish note, admitting she'd been a brat and that she missed my advice. It wasn't a perfect reconciliation, and I knew better than to expect one. But there was a genuine shift. They had faced the consequences. They had fallen, and they had, to some degree, picked themselves up. And in doing so, they had finally, truly seen me. Not as a resource, but as a person. I waited a few more weeks. I mulled it over. I had proven my point. I had established my boundaries. And a small part of me, the part that still loved them despite everything, felt a pang of something. Not forgiveness, not yet, but a willingness to acknowledge their struggle. So, with a quiet sense of victory, I made my final decision. I sent them financial support, but it was limited, controlled, and came with no strings attached and no expectation of gratitude. I established a fixed monthly allowance for my parents, enough for necessities, but not for lavish spending. And for Chloe, I committed to providing for her education, but only until she turned 18. Just like my parents had often preached to me when I was her age, especially when pushing me to take care of her. At 18, you're on your own. It was a cold, hard lesson, but it was fair. They had taught me this. And now, I was simply applying their own wisdom. My life was no longer defined by their needs, their demands, or their choices. It was defined by my own strength, my own peace, and my own purpose. And that, I realized, was the greatest triumph of all. And so, Lucy's journey, from a life of selfless sacrifice to one of powerful self-possession, reaches its fulfilling conclusion. Her story reminds us that while family bonds are strong, personal well-being and clear boundaries are essential for genuine happiness and growth. If Lucy's strength, her unwavering resolve to reclaim her life, and her ultimate triumph resonated with you, please consider giving this story a like. Your support helps us share narratives that explore the difficult but empowering path to self-worth and independence. For more captivating stories about navigating complex family dynamics, finding your voice, and building a life on your own terms, be sure to subscribe to our channel. We genuinely invite you to comment below with your thoughts on Lucy's choices, your own experiences with setting boundaries, or any insights this tale may have sparked within you. We truly value your feedback and appreciate every single comment. Thank you for joining us on Lucy's Hard-Won Independence. We look forward to connecting with you again.